If you're new to Fuji, like I was when I first bought this X-T3, then these tips should help you with the settings and getting at least a foundation on how to use this camera, which totally threw me when I first started using it. Let's start with the fundamental basics of aperture priority, shutter priority, and full auto. To set aperture priority, you will want to make sure that the shutter dial is set to A, and that on the lens, the little dial that has an A and an aperture symbol is set to aperture. Of course, you can also put ISO into auto, but if it's set to something, it's not going to affect whether you're in aperture priority or not. If you want to confirm you're in aperture priority, just look on the back of the Fuji monitor and you'll notice that the aperture setting has now turned to blue, just confirming that you are in aperture priority. To set shutter priority, you just want to make sure that the aperture is switched to A and then take the shutter dial off of A to whatever setting suits the situation. Now, just as you saw when we were in aperture priority, on the back screen it was in blue. Now that we're in shutter priority, that is in blue. Now that you know how to adjust those two, if you want to go full auto, basically you just set everything to A and the camera's in full auto. You can see that nothing is in blue on the screen, reflecting that the camera has full control over the settings and that you're not controlling anything. Now we're in photography mode, but if you do switch to taking video, you'll see that both the aperture and shutter speed completely disappear when you're in auto. If you do decide to switch over to manual, you'll as well notice that both the aperture and shutter speed are now in blue, again reflecting that you've got control over both of them. One other thing to mention here though is that if you adjust the shutter dial to the T setting, it does allow you to then utilize the back dial for even more control over the shutter speed, along with setting longer than normal exposures, which is really kind of cool. It really adds a nice flexibility to being able to adjust your shutter speed. It's a bit odd to me that when you get this camera new, they have the touchscreen turned off by default, but it's definitely something you're going to want to turn on because it really simplifies just being able to touch the screen to focus. And then of course, when you don't want to have that functionality, for example, when you're looking through the viewfinder, your nose, if it's touching the screen, is going to be affecting where you're focusing. So at that point, you're just going to want to click the off option, but otherwise, it's something you're going to want to on. To start, click menu and then go to your setup menu, select button dial settings, then scroll down to the third screen and select touchscreen settings. Once in that menu, just select touchscreen settings again and toggle to on and you're set. Now, while this camera has an awesome LCD screen and viewfinder, there is an adjustment I didn't know about at my first shoot and it drove me nuts that I hadn't adjusted it. So this is one that you're definitely going to want to take note of and adjust if you're doing a shoot, or in my case, I was doing video and I was trying to make adjustments. And every single time I would bring my hand up, there's a light sensor here that turns off the LCD screen and then turns on the viewfinder. So it's very frustrating, but it is very easily fixed. Right on the side of the viewfinder, you're going to find a button. And if you click that, you get different options. So, you get an option to have just the viewfinder on, you get an option to just have the LCD screen on. They give you about 3 or 4 options to choose from depending on how you prefer to shoot. In my case, I really prefer just to have one or the other on, not both kind of, ready and waiting. But that's my particular style. What's nice is they've made it really flexible, so whatever your particular style is, you've got an option there. The last settings I would really suggest looking at and making adjustments to is the function settings. This can really throw you off, being that when you get this camera, every button on the camera has a function attached to it. And so you really want to become familiar with those and dial it into what works really well for you. To do this, you just want to go into the menu, go to the setup wrench again, select button dial setting, and then select function setting. And in here, you can adjust every function for every button, even the screen functions for swipes, from left, right, up, and down. The functions I suggest really taking note of are the screen functions, the swiping. This really threw me. I had accidentally swiped, and next thing I knew, the screen had completely changed. I wasn't sure what was going on, but the camera wasn't really functioning the way, you know, I was expecting it to. It took me like 20 minutes to figure out what was going on, and that I had accidentally just barely swiped and changed the functionality of the camera. So you really, really want to especially look at those, you know, because the buttons are more tactile. You're paying more attention to when you accidentally press those, as where the screen, it's so easy to make that mistake of accidentally swiping and not realizing that you've done it. So that's all of my basic tips. I hope this helps. By the way, the next one I think is going to be on travel storage solution, because then I should be taking a trip and bringing you that adventure, trying to switch it up a bit. As always, though, if you've got any questions, comments, you know, something I may have missed or that you're curious about, please leave it below. I will try and get you an answer as best I can. I will see you guys in the next one. All right, bye.
Let me